Yeah, today we're talking a bit about CrunchDAO, a bit about DeSci, a bit about these two things coming together in a, we think, positive way for both the financial side, the business side of the DAO, and both about the potential unlocked by our perspective for scientific endeavors. So science for its own sake, let's say. Even though it's difficult to say science, it's for its own sakes, but let's say less attached to the core business of CrunchDAO. So CrunchDAO is a decentralized autonomous organization focused on using collective intelligence to find patterns in the stock market. So crowdsourcing investment strategies. And this is done in a data-driven perspective, but the fact that we are underlying data science also means that we have a clear vision of the role of science in rationalizing complex problems, complex systems, complex dynamical systems in this case, but in general, complex problems for which collective intelligence can play a role. So because we know that this is necessary, we have to enable complex collective intelligence to emerge. And so that's the DAO as a whole, but also DeSci, what DeSci is about. So a small slide about me. I'm a researcher. I worked in academia. I dropped out of a PhD for a number of reasons, but I think the main one, or at least the one which is relevant for us today, is that the incentives for publicly funded research are not aligned with the interests of at least PhDs. But I would say overall the academic system is characterized by some inefficiencies. Let's speak financially, characterized by many inefficiencies, which have consequences over our scientific power. And the opposite is true as well, as I was saying at the beginning. So the fact that we are inefficient scientifically leads us to be less powerful in the market as a business, as a DAO in this case. So CrunchDAO, as I said, is about data scientists. At this moment in time, we're around 2,000, of which around 400 are PhDs, have a PhD. And so we're working together to predict the stock market. And we're doing this with a weekly tournament. In this tournament, data with predictive power in them are anonymized, shared with the DAO, and then the DAO can build models. And these models are put together. And so you see the role of collective intelligence, are put together to construct a market-neutral and risk-adjusted profitable strategy for the stock market. There's a good relation between the interaction with the market and the internal ecosystem of the DAO, because the DAO is associated with tokenomics. So there is a token, a cryptocurrency called Crunch. And this token is associated with the performance of the signal produced by the DAO. And of course, then the currency is used to pay in the tournament people submitting models with good predictive power. So that's the idea of CrunchDAO, the core idea. Today, we're going to talk a bit around this core, and we're trying to expand the vision. And we're going to talk about the problems I mentioned in research, which are characterizing both academia and researcher development done in business. Why we believe that decentralized science can be an answer to both problems. And in particular, how CrunchDAO can use DeSci. And so maybe this is something less discussed in the DeSci space, but thinking about DeSci protocols and methodologies as a tool to then be more powerful as a business. So we're going to talk then in particular about our DeSci framework, and even more in particular, how to kickstart your DeSci project in 10 steps. So the three main points I would like to discuss are the fact that science, as traditional finance was doing decades ago, is working in silos. So academic groups are really incentivized to fight against each other, to compete, instead of building a common ground. And it's not an accident that DeSci is talking a lot about rethinking science as a public good. and then to build on top of that. So there's this characteristic of isolation characterizing publicly funded scientific endeavors in academia. This leads to what's called the tragedy of anti-commons. So the tragedy of commons is the most known one, and is about not integrating in the economy, let's say in the social economy, the fact that there's a common used by individuals that align with their individual interest, destroy then the common, and disable their ability to perform the activity that they're incentivized to perform in the system. The tragedy of anti-commons is kind of the opposite. So people are working and are not realizing that by aligning, they would make a common emerge, and they could build on top of that common. And so this expression is to say we are wasting a lot of energy in science to reinvent the wheel, to do the same things over and over again, instead of aligning our interests and then building on top of that. And that's the third point. Because we are not aligning the incentives, we are not able to see the opportunities we're losing. But if we align the incentives with the tokenomics and the DAO, we can then build on top of what's commonly known in the DAO. So we level up the game, and then we can reach opportunities which are lost. So as I said, the improvements which are needed are an infrastructure that enables us to avoid reinventing the wheel. Also, this enables us to rethink the ways in which we are communicating and storing units of knowledge, so science. And so we can go beyond, and we are not the first group to do this. There are many, many groups before us. But we want to join this effort to rethink how science is stored and how we can use internet technology. I have to say a lot of technologies are not coming from Web3 and blockchain, but have already characterized the open source movement, but have not yet entered the arena of business. And I think the reason is that as blockchain has seen its first application in finance, so in cryptocurrency, in Bitcoin, the same, I think, can be said about smart contracts. So the technology that's embedding decentralized autonomous organization is enabling us to see the technologies in a market perspective. But maybe more on this later. So yeah, these tools will be used to tackle the reproducibility crisis. In fact, both in finance and in other fields, it's really difficult to be able to read a paper and then say how to follow steps that can lead us to reproduce the exact same results. But to do this, we not only need technical tools, we also need incentive for replication. So we need to be incentivized to take a paper and reproduce it and be sure that that's actually true. And also overcome the limitations of traditional peer review, which is characterized, first of all, it's slow. Second, many times I've seen papers that went through peer review, got accepted, but then there were major flaws. And also the opposite, really good papers not being accepted by peer reviewers. And so we are thinking here about using traditional continuous integration, continuous CI/CD in software development to bring this way of working inside the production of a unit of knowledge, so papers. This DeSci is about this, and we think this can enable us to work together collectively, which we are already doing in the DAO. But to do this, targeting low-hanging fruits that become so because we are able to align our interests and our knowledge and reach things that are inaccessible to others. So yeah, many of these things are already part of CrunchDAO, being a DAO, and so we can work together without limits at greater scale. But I think the last point is touched specifically by DeSci, the use of DeSci in the DAO. And so for us, DeSci is really about the integration of the technology underlying the decentralized autonomous organization with the scientific method. And yeah, I didn't mention what decentralized autonomous organizations are, but they're making use of blockchain technology and consequences of it, and other technologies building on top of it, which allow people to define organizations which are governed by a set of rules, which are enforced on the blockchain, are different for different organizations. That's why they're autonomous. And they are decentralized because there's no central leadership. And so the way in which we'd like to perform science in CrunchDAO is about leveraging the tools of blockchain to enable the community to identify problems that are urgent for the DAO, and let's say that the goals of the DAO are implicit in the rules written in the blockchain for it. Then we can set up bounties to tackle these problems, and it's possible to pay people based on performance. Now, here one has to be careful to talk about performance because it could be arbitrary, but the advantage is that each DAO can have its own definition of performance. So I would say this avoids the hyper capitalization of research, of science, if you want. But I have another point on this later in the slide, which is here. So the improvements of this perspective is that all these technologies align the interest of the members of the DAO, which can then become a decentralized scientific lab with no clear head and with many people working on the same problem, which is already the same problem, but the current incentives are not enabling us to recognize that. And so with this, we can speed up the research process and arrive earlier at important results. And this is important for science. But the third point, which clarifies what I was saying before, is that from a business standpoint, this gives a lot of economic certainty, translates research uncertainty into economic certainty. What do I mean by this? Is that a DAO is able to, I mean, if you think about the transition between a classical business and a DAO is a business with a lot of outsourcing done in research and development, and this is good for the security, for the stability of the business, so of the flourishing of the DAO. But at the same time, DeSci enables scientists to become something like entrepreneurs, because someone can be a member of different DAOs, can work to target different problems. And most importantly, if the infrastructure is used correctly, one can set up, and it's worth mentioning here the work of the DeSci Foundation and the DeSci Labs, set up retroactive rewards and recognition of work done for really long times. And these bounties can therefore backpropagate, and sorry for the machine learning jargon, but can backpropagate the payment for work done months before, years before, to reach the goal of a certain bounty. And because of the immutability of the production of code and documents guaranteed by the technology, this can be enforced algorithmically. And this is really cool for people interested in going after long-term goals, and also to be scientific entrepreneurs. So, talking about the CrunchDAO framework, talking about all these things, we realized that actually already the tournament is some kind of decentralized science, because it's a data science problem, but it's nonetheless science. And so CrunchDAO is performing DeSci in this framework, doing tournaments. But also now we're thinking if, and I'll show you some numbers later, if this crowdsourcing is working well at the level of the tournament, why not open the research on all the main quantitative questions of the DAO and make decisions with the DAO? That's the next step. In fact, the numbers we've seen are really impressive. There's an increase between not crowd-funded strategies and crowd-funded strategies, crowdsourced, sorry. We have an increase between 50% and 250% in the performance. So if we take one model or 300 1,000 models. This is the level of increase in performance. So it's really impressive. And the goal now is to say, what about the underlying assumption of the tournament? So all the science that can be done at the border of the tournament. What if we change something there? How much can the performance of the DAO increase? So that's where we're going, and we'd like to discuss, to open up the discussion about the meta modeling, and also the definition of what the goals should be with the DAO. And this really aligns the interests of the members of the DAO with the DAO as a whole. For example, we've been thinking about the true contribution perspective in the production of the signal. That could be powerful, but there's a risk of putting DAO members away from the overall goal of the DAO. Because, yeah, I guess you can take a look at the paper. I don't want to get into technical details, but it's important to set up the infrastructure so that the members of the DAO have these interests aligned with the DAO as a whole. So yeah, this slide is just to show that crowdsourcing is also important for, let's say, it's a positive feedback loop. This is the performance of the number of participants in the tournament since the end of 2021. And lastly, about the design infrastructure already existing, there is a video on YouTube. You can find it linked in this video in our website. It's a bit everywhere in the Discord and in the GitHub. Most importantly, in the README of the GitHub, you can find a tutorial about how to use it. It's an infrastructure that integrates, as I said, the traditional ways of working of software developers with the production of papers and units of knowledge. And here I've put the 10 steps to use it. But yeah, I guess the tutorial is much clearer than me now. So I'll let you take a look at it. And yeah, today was more about trying to show you where we'd like to go in the future, and not about discussing the product, because it's a really alpha version. But I think the production of it allowed us to look deep in the future and to see a lot of opportunities for the DAO. Let me know. I guess we can open up for some questions if there's something. Yes, definitely. That there is a document. In fact, I didn't mention, but the alpha version of the software enabled us to produce a first version of a decentralized paper. It's not the only definition of decentralized paper, but it's basically a paper generated using GitHub. So we are writing in Markdown, which I think is a benefit because we're getting away from LaTeX as much as possible. Markdown is a simple language developed by Aaron Schwartz, and it's easier. Then we use LaTeX in the backend with the GitHub Actions to produce papers. And in fact, we have the paper living in our website. If you go at DeSci.CrunchDAO.com, let me type it. You can see that the paper is there. And it's a big question. Now I'll ask it. I'll answer it, sorry. And there is IPFS, which is associated with the website. So you can see it's on our GitHub and our website. Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is the DAO. I mean, yeah, there's this freedom to decide collectively, to make arbitrary choice collectively. I mean, all choices are arbitrary, but these are more difficult, and so that there has to be a choice made by the DAO at the beginning of this process. So yeah, I agree. Can change in time. Yeah. The bounties should also be weighted in time. Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. I mean, but these long-term contributions are really something we have to think about. But the interesting part is the short-time ones. We can say, I don't know. We did this. We saw this paper. The DAO says that we would like to replicate it with a different, I don't know, with a different neural network, with a different integration tolerance to see what happens. Or the problem is stated such that we want to find a reduced order representation of a system using whatever model, but the framework is different because actually here we're doing science, so in being reproducible. So we're not only interested in the outcome, but also in the model itself, in the methodology. Great. Bye, Jan. I guess we can all go. Let's see if there's any other question, but I think we're in time. Okay, great. Thank you all, and see you around. Talk to you soon.